When daylight breaks, I'll be down that road. Rockman and me with a lighter load. We'll stop for lunch in some taco bar. Lee Marvin on the jukebox. Wandering Star. Hi, how are you, everybody? It is good to see you, and of course, it is good to be seen by you. I am the one and only Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver, coming to you a little bit later on a Wednesday than usual. We've got kind of an ad hoc show tonight. We're bringing the fun, is what we're doing. We're bringing the fun and the enjoyment and the happiness and all that magical jazzmatazz, because Kyle could not make it. Kyle could not make it tonight, but that's okay. That is absolutely fine. He was detained with some stuff around the house, and while I won't go so far as to say that this is a family-oriented show, certainly not. We're all about family here. We like and appreciate the efforts of all the moms and dads and sons and daughters and cousins and aunts and uncles and all that jazzmatazz that make everything function on a day-to-day basis. So I completely get it. I'm sure we'll have my churlish Antipodean co-host back with us next week, hopefully, crossing fingers, knock on wood. Jorge, how are you? It's good to see you, and I hope you are doing great. No, actually, Orbital Air, you bring me to my next point, which is tomorrow we have a guest. Stephen Radney McFarland will be here tomorrow, and I am really looking forward to that. Of course, Stephen is a veteran of the psychic wars that go on over at Wizards of the Coast, and he has some insight and some tales that will absolutely curl your hair of his days working inside the corporate world amongst the C-suite executive shark tank that is being an organ, a department, a sort of limb, if you will, of the body politic that is Hasbro. And of course, we'll talk about lots of fun stuff too otherwise. So I'm looking forward to that. Stephen is a good guy, but I have a co-pilot with me tonight. I'm not going to leave him hanging out in the green room too often, especially because when I passed on my way to the studio, I saw he was getting into the pistachios and the craft beers. So please, if you would, everybody, welcome tonight's guest. I certainly hope, if he's going to be on camera, that he's wearing more than just a t-shirt. But folks, put your hands together for the one and only T-shirted historian. How are you, sir?
Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. It's your T-shirted historian. Good to see you.
Oh, man, it's good to see you, too. And thanks for being here tonight. Now, by the way, congratulations on getting over the 1K sub hump on YouTube. That is,
man,
that is pretty awesome. You have reached that plateau, and there are certainly many in front of you. But, dude, that's great. Congratulations.
I am so happy. Let me tell you, it took so long to get there, but I stuck to my guns, stayed with the program, tried not to change things too much, and I made it. So.
You did. You absolutely did. And you did it on merits that are worthy and absolutely worth discussing. So to my viewers, look, whether you're live right now watching us, or you're catching this tomorrow, or whenever in the future, assuming that we haven't all been EMP'd or something like that. And, we're now down to, hey, I got 10 people in the town square listening to me talk. that we're not at that stage yet, please do go to T-Shirted's channel. It's linked down below, and click that subscribe button. Just open another tab in your browser and do it. Okay, what's wrong with you? Anyway, so do that because it is a good channel. Iron Caster, hello, how are you? Alan canning, but the question is, what is he canning? I have it on good authority. It's high quality salmon. Orbital Air, of course, I greeted. Jorge, good to see you. Christopher Sims. So anyway, how have you been, man? It's been a couple of weeks the last time you were on.
Yeah. Last time we were talking about Latinorcs.
See, in there, they have their orcish. I guess it would be a taco cart.
Yes.
Yes.
Or where they sell oranges, or or they're cooking tacos.
Yeah, exactly. I imagine if they're orcs, probably the bags that they're holding up the off ramps to City Greyhawk they're probably like kobold heads, just a big mesh bag full of kobold heads. Anyway, we're gonna build a wall and we're gonna make Furiandi pay for it. Anyhow, yeah. So we were talking about Latinorcs, and I don't see much as the good people at Wizards of the Coast have backed off of that, but what are we gonna do, man?
Well, we took a shot at the spells video that they put out, telling us how wonderful and how awesomely improved and worthwhile the new spell book is going to be for the latest edition. And we were basically laughing our way through it because they were sitting here trying to sell us on how great it is. And I'm kind of like, every single thing that you have listed that is supposed to be a brand new feature is something that other games have already been doing, or these are things that you should have put in the book to begin with and not left them out, including summoning spells, which apparently they got rid of for 5th edition for some reason.
Like summon monster or summon elemental?
Yeah, summon monster.
That was not in 5e?
I guess not. I mean, I've never looked for it myself, but yeah, according to Grim, he said, yeah, they weren't in there because they were causing a pain in the butt to everybody. So now their big news is they put summoning spells in, and I'm just kind of like, and you want a cookie or something for that?
Oh my God. They put summoning spells in. I mean, props to them for doing it, but I'm reminded of this has been a number of years back, but Apple did their big developers convention, and it was after Microsoft had released the Surface. And I remember Apple was really, they were tooting their own horn, and they were going bonkers over this feature that they had added, and it was a fold-out magnetic keyboard, which the Surface had all along. And Tim Cook was up there like, oh, we've added a keyboard and now it's better than ever. And I am not a fan of Microsoft, don't get me wrong. But as much as I dislike Microsoft, I dislike Apple like 10 times more than that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Particularly for stunts like this, because it has been their mode and modus from the get-go.
Here you go, Bill. Here you go. I've got this. You like gum, don't you?
Gum, like chewing gum?
Yeah, chewing gum. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to sell you some. We've got some brand new gum, and it is improved over the original because, okay, first off, we put it in a wrapper, an aluminum foil wrapper, so we can individually give you each piece. And then what's cool is we stamped the foil with our logo, so you know exactly where it's coming from. And the best part, we put it in in multiple size packages, so you can either buy it in a 6-pack, a 12-pack, or if you're really a big gum chewer, a 48-pack. Isn't that awesome? And we're only going to charge you 3 times the going rate for your ordinary pack of gum. So instead of those little individual packages of blackjack, buy our gum, D&D gum.
Yeah, how disruptive! What a big sea change to the gum chewing hobby that's going to be. And yeah, that's again, I the fact that they put the summoning back in is, I guess, an appropriate thing. I mean, I'm just at this point now. Let me for those of you who don't know. T-shirted's content, and you should be subscribed to his channel right now if you're not already. You are a braver soul than I. You will straight up go out and get a new RPG or a new game and talk about it. I've got this. I've got stuff to talk about. Hey, Doc Flamingo, been a member for 5 months. Thank you, Doc. Are you going to do it? Are you going to get 6E?
I really don't know. I know Grim is getting a copy because he feels like he has to, so he has to look at it. But as for me, myself, I resisted getting 5th edition until I absolutely had to because I had a gaming group that was playing it. Mm-hmm. So I will probably avoid the temptation until fate forces me to, because honestly, from the sounds of things, there's nothing in there that's worth buying it for. There's no new or innovative things that they're going to do that other systems haven't already done and done better. So, including the original, I might add. And I'll tell you something, kudos to 1st edition D&D, man, because something they did, well, I should say 2 things that they did that I hadn't really realized how awesome they were until I saw the lack of them being such a problem in later editions. Is the first thing is they apparently had rules for negative hit points all along that nobody ever used.
Yes, everyone, the baseline assumption is 0 is dead, and it is that way in original and in basic D&D, but AD&D actually has a fairly complex bleeding out system.
Mm-hmm. And, we thought that was a brand new innovation in 3.0 because every AD&D game I ever played, no DM ever used that. It was 0 hit points, you're dead. Mm-hmm. But the other thing was, we got on a discussion about treasure the other day. And the more we started talking about the importance and the role of treasure and the gold piece value, the more I started to see how important those XP rules were for gold piece values in 1st edition D&D, because not only does it give your character something to continue to strive for, to quest and adventure for, but it's also, it's so integral to, the later game, the manor building and everything else that people seem to avoid these days, like children.
Yeah. And I remember that coming up not too long ago. I just kind of like a fleeting glimpse, like, you catch a picture, you're taking a train across the Great Plains of America and you glance out and you see perhaps 400 or 500 yards off the, off the tracks, a barn, and you just see a glimpse of chrome and rust and red paint. And there's a classic car in there, but it's gone before it even has time to register in your mind. And that was my fleeting view of someone mentioning that like castle building and such was an option that was given now in 5e, probably through something you could download off of the web. But I was just like, oh. And then I kind of moved on because there's an extensive castle building system in AD&D, and I need not worry about that. I will say this, and I tell you, dude, I've said this since 2014. The bones of 5th edition are good. Mm-hmm. Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, that and that alone. No Tasha's, no crap from online.
Yes.
Nothing added in through their adventure path hardbacks. It's a cromulent game. Would I change it? Yes, there would be heavy house ruling. But if somebody said, "Hey, we really, we kind of want to do the 5e thing. We don't mind if you house rule a little bit. Will you run us, through some 5e?" Sure. I would just insist that we just don't wave your phone in my face and say that, you downloaded some new class and spells and feats and equipment and background picks and stuff like that. Just, we're going to use what's in the 3 books, and then that would be the breadth and depth of it. But if somebody said, "Hey, run D&D for me, any D&D you want," I'm grabbing my AD&D books in a heartbeat,
Oh, yeah. Nothing wrong with it. And, you mentioned Tasha's. I think that was the most criminal thing that they could have done, was what they did with the races, because what people don't seem to get is the fact that the races having differentiated stats and abilities and things was actually like of core importance to the game in determining, how one race plays from another. It gives a completely different flavor to every different race. But now, with Tasha's, you can just take any set of stat bonuses you want, and you can take any abilities that you want and everything else. It doesn't matter, because now, it's all going to be background based. Your race isn't going to matter anymore. And I'm just like, well, then why play any race? I mean, why doesn't everybody just play a human? Because now you can just be a human with dark vision or whatever, because,
Yeah.
What's the point?
Exactly. And what they did there with Tasha's, I mean, it's the difference between, AD&D's portrayal of races other than human, would be like Star Trek, even the original Star Trek, their portrayals of races other than humans having unique things about them. I mean, in 1966, the idea of a completely stoic race that does not brook any emotions whatsoever, that had to be pretty mind-blowing to mom and dad parking in front of the Zenith, and watching that along with, little Billy and Janie. But the difference between that and the aliens on Lost in Space, and then it was just like the blue person, the silver person, the red person, just whatever color grease paint we need to put on them this week and have them say and do slightly absurd things, but they're still just people. They reduced D&D to the Lost in Space forehead of the week club.
Exactly. It's almost like it's kind of like Star Wars these days, where you look at, they have these fantastic, just cool looking different aliens and everything else, and they all have the exact same set of emotions, principles, and evidently genitals, since there's a cross species attractiveness inherent in some of these races. So now it's like, what difference does it make?
Yeah, and that gets down. I don't want to go too far down the path of Let's Bash 5e or any other edition, because honestly, I fought the edition wars and I won. I won because I walked away from them and said, "Well, I'm just going to keep playing AD&D. I'm just, or OD&D, or even basic D&D, and I'm not going to let you scream in my ears anymore, or in my eyes, as most of it was online, that I'm wrong for enjoying this." But there's so much of that. They've just reduced it to, just a mush, just a paste.
Grey goo.
Anyone of any race, of any alignment, of any set of stats can be a paladin. The word paladin is completely meaningless.
Yes, especially since the alignments don't mean anything now.
Yeah.
With paladins.
Yeah, it's like you say paladin to me, and I'm thinking lawful good, human, with a minimum wisdom of 14, a minimum charisma of 12, minimum charisma of 17, a minimum strength of 12, a minimum constitution of 14. It is a very particular set of stats. And if you're lucky enough to have them, well, you've got a fantastic character there. And now it's just like, yeah, my quarter tiefling, halfling, paladin, gnome, with a touch of artificer and 2 levels of gelatinous cube. But he's totally a paladin.
Oh yeah.
And he's chaotic evil, by the way.
Uh-huh. Well, I made this joke, and I mean, at the time I thought it was funny on Twitter, but it surprised me how much it caught on and how many people liked the idea and latched onto it. And then I realized part of the genius of not only the racial stat modifiers, but also, why Gygax had certain classes gated off by stat modifiers, like the 17 charisma paladin. And the joke I made was, I said, as a joke, I should, make everybody in the party play fighters and then have to actually pay a trainer or something gold in order to get into a different class like magic user or whatever else, because the fighter is pretty much the weakest, one-dimensional creature in the entire game. And I mean, I'll argue that with anybody as far as classes go, because he pretty much has one solution to everything: kill it. He doesn't really have the diplomacy of a paladin or a cleric or anything else. He doesn't have the intelligence of a wizard. He doesn't have the sneaky skills of a thief or any of the other tools or tricks, especially not the magic. And that's a great weakness in a world where you have magic. But then, everybody latched onto that idea and they go, hey, that's actually a good idea. We should actually encourage people to do stuff like this. And so lo and behold, one of the people who actually got behind me on this was Griff Morgan from
Yeah, I know
Blackmore.
Yeah. That is that's a fascinating way to approach it. It kind of mirrors. I've seen people do this where they say, okay, you start out as level 0, no one has a class. Mm-hmm. What we do in these first few sessions kind of determines what your class is going to end up being, and maybe we all start out, nobody has exceptional stats, but we build on those. And then wham bang, at the end of this micro campaign, you're fully fledged D&D characters, or AD&D characters. But yeah, no, that's kind of a fascinating approach to it. But to go back to the issue with paladins, I mean, it's the pulling down of everything. I mean, it's like, I love steak, I love peas, I love mashed potatoes, I love a nice salad. I want them separate on my plate. Don't throw them in a blender and turn it into a mush.
Prison
dump
loaf.
it out. Yeah, exactly. Because it's not going to be good. And but you were mentioning something earlier that I want to kind of come back to, and I've talked about this a lot, and I think it's a wisdom that people tend to overlook, and it is where I think there was such a huge disconnect. I honestly, you can actually see it's like you've seen flooded areas or areas that were flooded, right? Whether it's an abutment, a bank, whatever, and you can see the lines of the water. It is as clear a delineation between I understood this and I didn't understand that. And that is the use of XP or GP for XP. Because so many DMs, and I want to ask you a question, just slightly after I start this polemic, but I think so many DMs, younger DMs probably, looked at that, thought it was silly, and just didn't use it. They just said, when you get your XP, you just level up. But then they turned around and said, well, oh my gosh, AD&D first edition is broken. My characters, they can buy an army by 5th level. The 5th level fighter has 250,000 gold pieces. What's wrong with this game? Well, I hope we can fix that one day. And so you had, Ryan Dancy. Well, not even Ryan Dancy, but I think, I'm not sure. Maybe you can tell me this because I have not played enough 2nd edition AD&D to know, did it keep the paying for levels?
No, it didn't.
Okay.
That was gone by 2nd edition.
Okay.
By 3rd edition. And then, of course, 5th edition brought us... Well, actually, I would say this started as early as Pathfinder 1st edition, especially with Pathfinder Society. But the whole milestone thing actually kind of started there, and now it's just, why do you adventure at all? You might as well be a barista in a coffee house because you don't have to go make your gold.
Yeah, just level dinging.
Yeah.
But so I know you have played some 1st edition AD&D, not to the exclusion of other games, but you have played some. So this was my question for you. When you got to that, when you got to that stage, if there were any extensive campaigns you played, did you find the DM maybe hitting a point of, and I don't say this as pejorative at all, but I don't understand this, therefore I'm not going to use it. And then that later led to things just not working properly because they'd thrown that out.
As an early GM, an early player, no, but that's the difference between when I was a younger player and the way I am now. As a younger player, we didn't necessarily understand the systems so well, and we played fast and loose with the rules and everything else, so it kind of became its own thing. As I've gotten older and researched more and more systems and gone back and compared them to the originals and everything and started seeing where Gygax got it right the first time. And now I see where the wheels kind of fell off. And the funny thing is, we were having a conversation with Alexander McCrease a couple of Saturdays ago. And he was telling us, he said, I've got this stuff so well figured out, and then I have people contacting me and saying that like their gladiator is broken. The gladiator class is broken. And so I asked him, well, what did you do? Actually, he said, well, are you leaving the armor mechanics on? Well, no, my player didn't like that, so I just let him wear whatever armor he wants to. Okay. Well, how about these movement rules and everything? Well, no, we didn't like that, so we took that out. So Alexander McCrease's thing is he says, don't complain to me about my game being broken if you're not playing it as I wrote it.
Yeah, exactly. And what is it? This is one of those things that it literally it bordered on me getting to shouting in text, and I didn't want to do that. But someone was getting into it with me, and I honestly, it's such a on the face of it ludicrous take. I just, in retrospect, I was like, is this person trolling me? Are they just kind of having me on? Because their thesis was that AD&D was an incomplete game, that it was not complete.
What?
And they started to go, they said, it wasn't until 3rd edition that there were rules cases introduced for everything. So dungeon masters didn't have to make things up as they went, and players didn't have to guess at what the rules might be. And I was reminded, oh, Doc Flamingo, thank you for the super. I'm going to put that up on screen there. I started all new characters at 0, stat 9 lets you get to first level, 18 needed to hit, 10, max level, no XP, leveled up by... sounds pretty interesting, Doc, but thank you for the super. But I actually heard this from a Navy aviator or from an Air Force aviator once. And he said that there are 2 books of equal thickness and page count. One is published by Navy Air Operations Command, and the other is published by Air Force Operations Command. And the one for the Navy, for Naval Air Ops, is titled All the Things You're Not Allowed to Do in an Aircraft. And the one for the Air Force is identical, except it's titled All the Things You Are Allowed to Do in an Aircraft. And the point being was that the Air Force, the implication by the Air Force veteran I was talking to was that the Air Force is more open to innovative pilot tactics than Navy aviation, and to apply this to Dungeons and Dragons, to advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and later, is you look at something like first edition AD&D. Well, you look exactly at first edition AD&D, and there's very little in there once you get outside of the combat rules that you need rules for. Mm-hmm. And that's not a point of incompletion. What do you think about that?
No, you're exactly right. You know, I've had this discussion a couple of times, and it really doesn't matter what game system you pick up if for TTRPGs. Generally speaking, your combat section is going to be your most robust section with the most amount of rules that govern how it works. Mm-hmm. I said because, you know, any game with skill systems, it's almost always boiled down to a skill check. 1 dice roll, pass, fail. You know, maybe you have a gradation if you have like, you know, certain systems. But combat, there's so many different things you can do in combat, and nobody would like it if it was just a case of, okay, you have a combat skill, the enemy has a combat skill, you both roll your combat skills, whoever gets the higher one wins. You see? Right,
so. And that's, yeah, that you've got, I think Cyberpunk, well, I know Mechton does, it's Tim Imholt and I did a Mechton demo, you know, you have the dice versus dice, but no, you're absolutely right, and you definitely get it, as it were, in that the you know, I just feel like, again, it goes back to my original thesis. People look at the subsystems; they don't look at AD&D holistically and say, this is a set of functioning subsystems that intermesh. If you throw out gold for leveling, your characters become too rich. They can solve every problem you can throw at them with money. Mm-hmm. If you, you know, if you skip wilderness encounters, then your campaign world is dead and uninhabited. And your players can march from A to B and never worry about running into anything that you didn't stick there.
Mm-hmm. I have a GM who has insisted on creating a lot of homebrew races and putting them in the game. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, some of these homebrew races have really, really, really high stat modifiers, mm-hmm. which in and of itself is, you know, changes game balance tremendously. I mean, because for one thing, nobody would want to play a human when virtually every homebrew race, you know, is just so much better in every way, shape, and form. But the other part of it is that he didn't like how low the hit points were, especially in relation to the fact that he had all these homebrew races that were hitting so hard and doing so much damage. So he jacked with the hit point system, and then he's got a case of hit point bloat going all through the game. And I'm just kind of like, I'm saying, what you created a problem, and then you created another problem to fix the other problem, and this is just going to keep stacking up. And what are you doing? If you had just played this the way it was originally written, with the game balance intact, you wouldn't have this problem so much.
Yeah. No, it's, and you're right. You're absolutely right. And you hit on something else. One of the things that chapped me about third edition when I first saw it was CR. Was it
you talking about ECL, extended character level?
No, encounter balancing.
God, yeah, encounter balancing. CR.
Challenge
rating.
Challenge rating. Thank you. I knew CR stood for something, but all my brain could do was go to critical role. Was challenge rating. Challenge rating is a fetters.
It doesn't work
on the hands of a GM. But challenge rating is there because, again, Dancy and Company fundamentally didn't understand how D&D worked. And I'm sorry, I absolutely believe that. If that loses me a subscriber 10, I'm really sorry. They fundamentally didn't understand how D&D worked. And I know this because I had a discussion with Ryan Dancy about how AD&D First Edition is, to my knowledge, the only edition of Dungeons & Dragons that has a built-in mechanic for rewarding good role play. I don't want to get off on that tangent, but he didn't know that. He didn't realize that. He said it didn't, and I showed him the exact pages in the Dungeon Master's Guide. But challenge rating said, if your players are this level, never throw, this mathematically is too difficult for them. Don't send 5 ogres after a first level party. And it goes back to just the idea of, people didn't read the section on good role play. People didn't read the section on GP for XP and why that is. People didn't read the section, the very small note in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Don't just put magic shops in your games. Sven, the shopkeep in a village of 100 people, should not be ready, willing, and able to buy the set of +5 plate mail you dragged out of the dragon's lair.
No.
They didn't do things like read up on treasure types in the monster manual, that the given treasure types are for the mean. If you roll 10 orcs, they're not going to have every coin you could potentially roll up in treasure type C. They're going to have maybe a tenth of it, maybe none of it. But getting back to challenge rating, a bit of reading for players is the only challenge rating management you need in AD&D. And it is this, and I can quote it. I believe it's on page 121, if somebody wants to grab their player's handbook and check it out. And it is 3 words: avoid unnecessary encounters. There, I just fixed your balance problem. We can't possibly beat a huge adult red dragon. We're only average 4th level. Then don't go attack it. Don't attack it. It's on a mountain 2 miles away. Pray for the villagers. Find a way to help them escape at night. Create a kind of a caravan. You're casting darkness 15-foot radius and silence 15-foot radius, and everybody's bunching up, and you're saving the village, by getting them away from the dragon. Or maybe you have an exceptionally charismatic player and they're feeling ballsy and they'll go up there and try, to have a reaction roll on speaking with the dragon, but avoid unnecessary encounters. It's not up to the GM to put the little doodads. Have you got any youngins yourself?
Nah.
Okay. But I'm sure you've seen parents, they got the socket protectors and the,
oh yeah, we had those in my house.
Yeah. All those gadgets to stop the kids from hitting themselves. And CR is basically wrapping everything in bubble wrap, including the kids, and making sure that nothing too dangerous comes at them. Jorge, I think it's on page 121. But it is entirely incumbent on the party to look at something and say, we can't, guys, we can't take that down. We can't beat that. And but the dungeon master put it in the dungeon. Run from it.
I tell you,
good.
This happened recently. Within the last year or so, my players got furious at me and thought I was just an unfair GM for doing this. But we were playing. It was our first time to play Hyperborea, which is a great system.
Yes,
and it's
Jeff
very much like
wrote that.
Yeah, very much like old school D&D. And the party is escorting a group of caravaneers, right? And one of the party members spots, definite signs that, there's an ambush up ahead. So they know it's coming. They have plenty of time to get ready for it. When the ambush actually does hit, it's like, I'm generating how many attackers are a part of the ambush party, and I'm kind of like, I think I said like 12, because it's got to be a decent sized group to take down a caravan.
Right.
3 guys don't go assault a caravan. So the party saw the raiders coming, had plenty of time to do stuff about it. I think I told them, I said, okay, look, they're far enough away. You got enough advanced warning. You have about 4 rounds that you can act and do something before they reach combat distance, where they can melee you, because they're not carrying any ranged weaponry themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what did the party decide to do? Well, first we're going to use all of our ranged weapons and spells. Okay, your first levels, this is you're doing decent damage, but it's not enough to kill all 12 of them. So naturally, the enemy closes. And I'm not being unfair. I don't have them all gang up on the party themselves. I spread the combat out, as would be logical. And I said, okay, you've got at least, I'm accounting for the fact that, each one of these raiders is engaging a guard. There's still enough left over for 2 each on the party members. So each of you is facing 2 guys at first level. So what happened? TPK, of course.
Yeah.
And they were furious with me. And I said, you had 4 rounds to act. You knew in advance they were coming. You had all these different things that you could have done to prep for this. You could have even run away or hidden or done anything else to circumvent this entire encounter. But you chose to try to stand and fight against superior numbers, and now you're pissed at me because your characters all got killed. And I'm the bad guy here. I don't know. I mean, am I just a cruel killer DM for doing that? Because, they were... And we're not talking young players either. We're talking about guys in their 60s and 70s who played the AD&D game. They were furious with me for it.
No, then they absolutely should have understood that. there are situations where some days you get the bear and someday the bear gets you. It's like there's 8 of us in the party. There's 6 kobolds. And, at the end of the fight, the one conscious character with a couple of hit points is begging the kobolds to spare him.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the exact opposite of that. I'm going to tell you the night and day story. I love recounting this tale. I was doing my homebrewed Castle Greyhawk game, and I had a party stumble into a bunch of cultists on the 2nd level. They did for them, and one of them cries out to Orcus for help, and he makes a boo-boo and says Orcus's true name, and Orcus dispatches a type 6 demon to deal with them all. Average party level is 4. High was 4.5, but they had a paladin with them. And they didn't run. They stood and they fought, and they beat the thing primarily because they had a paladin with them. And I have never I blew so many magic resistance rolls when the 2 spell capable characters were dumping magic missiles into this thing, and I rolled its hit points on the spot. It had terribly average hit points. I think it was sub 40 hit points. And when you consider it's an 8+8 hit dice monster, you can see how rough that is.
Yeah.
And so they slew it. They slew it with very little damage to themselves. On their way out, same night, same party, on their way out, random encounter, a dozen giant rats. 2 characters were conscious to drag the downed party members out after that fight. Now, a 4th level party, a type 6 demon appears. Obviously, you think we run from it. A 4th level party, a dozen giant rats appear. Hand me a flask of oil, would you? But that's just kind of the nature of it. And I don't subscribe to it's incumbent on the DM to use challenge rating. Mm-hmm. It's incumbent on the players to avoid unnecessary encounters. They didn't have to stop and fight those rats. They didn't have to stop and fight the demon. But in both cases, they chose to. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like it's you know what, Jimmy, normally I would ask for a super for that, but it's you, bud, and you absolutely deserve this. The gleam in the eye of Sit. There, that was for Jimmy Invictus. But anyway, no, it's incumbent on the party to avoid unnecessary encounters. And that's a design choice by Gary. If you subscribe to the No, hundreds of people wrote AD&D also, one of them, but avoid unnecessary encounters. You don't have to fight a given monster. Now, Alan Canning up the chat, and I want your answer to this. Alan asked, let me see, where is it? At least I think it was Alan, and I apologize if it wasn't. Yes, Alan said, should the DM give hints when the monsters are very deadly? What do you think?
I mean, I usually do just by description. I mean, if I tell you, it's a 10-foot tall, muscular, creature with a heavily scarred hide and a club that's stained brown with blood, and it appears to be, pretty vicious. That should kind of be, a little bit of a warning that what you're taking on is going to be pretty tough. But I mean, the first time the monster hits one of the characters, that should be your first indicator right there that you're overmatched. You know?
Yeah.
You know, the Minotaur hitting you for like 2 die 12 with his axe is kind of like, that should kind of get your attention really quick, you know, whatever.
Now, I know a Minotaur, and a Minotaur does not hit for an average of 14 points of damage. What the hell just happened?
Yeah.
But no, you're absolutely correct in that, and it goes to I think it speaks to the idea of not taking things for granted and not solving every problem with your sword. Or with spells or with what have you. There are negotiation rules. To go back to, there's no role-playing rules in AD&D. Yes, there are. There's the reaction roll. Who's the best spoken character in the party? Well, Bob the Paladin has always impressed me with it. Bob, get up here. See if and that's an oft not used thing. Again, that's a rule that's discarded. Parlay with a monster. There's 500 orcs and you just walked into their Grand Order of the Water Buffaloes meeting. Parlay.
Yeah.
You might have a chance to just quietly back out and close the door and walk away and come back at another time alive and well, instead of relying on the DM going, we don't know. And that's something, man, we could be here till dawn talking about all the problems with 4E, but what was it, Minion or Mook? No, they didn't call them Mooks. Basically, it was like monsters, regardless of how tough they were, just had 1 hit point, so the party could just plow through them to get to Lee epic boss battle.
Mooks, yeah.
Yeah, and that just, man, that didn't sit with me. And the thing that really, at first I thought, well, that's kind of a dumb idea, but I was looking on Wizards of the Coast very forums when they had those. I don't know if they still have them, and I don't particularly care if they still have them, but there was someone posting he was upset because the dungeon master wouldn't tell them if the monsters they were fighting were minions.
But they don't have hats on or, goggles.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the level of entitlement that comes with that mindset of, well, he wouldn't tell us. We didn't know if we should use up our valuable spells before the boss fight. Well, maybe you just have to tough it out. Maybe you have to think beyond, my special powers. I don't know. Am I just being an old grandpa here? So Ironcaster brings up something, it touches on something that you brought up. And that is, am I not a fan of death at 0 hit points? It depends on the game. It absolutely depends on the game. Just like there are card games, even variations of poker where certain hands have certain values that are different from values in other hands. I go with the system. If I'm playing OD&D, 0 hit points is dead. If I'm playing basic, 0 hit points is dead. If I'm playing first edition AD&D, which is what I play now, 0 hit points is unconscious and bleeding out. You have 10 rounds for someone to stop the bleeding and save you. You are comatose for 1 to 6 turns, and you may then not adventure for a maximum of a week, however long it takes you to naturally heal your hit points back. Even magic healing after you get out of the coma, even if it brings you back up to 44 hit points, you still have that shock to overcome. You are quite literally at death's door. And I think that is a perfectly reasonable system to use rather than 0, you're dead. Now, AD&D also includes a rule, which I incorporate, which is, let's say you have 10 hit points and you're hit for a total of 14 damage. That brings you to -3, or in this case, -4. You're dead. Just as effectively as if you were playing OD&D and dropped to 0. Now, I remember a few weeks ago, T-shirted, you and Harmony, and I think Ironcaster were talking about hit points and damage, and I kind of interrupted you guys, but doing that is not really the point of the discussion now. But I seem to recall you had different feelings about that, and I'd like to hear your point of view about hit points and such like.
Oh, it's just, hit points are not very well defined because, on the one hand, Gygax himself said that they were not necessarily like, like your character's physical mass or anything increasing as they go up in levels, but rather it's supposed to be their skill at arms and being able to dodge blows and avoid things and parry, etc., etc., etc.
Favor from the gods, luck, that sort of thing. Yes.
Yeah. And yet, all the cure spells are for healing. So what are you doing? Are you healing people's parrying ability? Are you healing people's endurance? Are you healing? It just seems like it's nebulous, and it's something I don't like. I would rather, if he's gonna do something like that, actually have something to the effect of like an actual set vitality score that does not go up ever.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe make it based on con, like your con is equal to the amount of damage you can physically take before you die. It might go up a little bit through play or through gifts or whatever. But generally, if you started with an 18 con, you're going to have an 18 con for your entire, adventuring career.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all the damage you can take. Instead, what you do is you bring the role of armor into the game and make it do what it's supposed to do historically, which is stop damage.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of it being a deflection bonus that requires you to have, more and more pluses to, avoid hits. Because the plus stacking gets ridiculous after a while.
It can.
And it really got bad in Pathfinder First Edition, where you had like plus 15, plus 20, plus, by the time you were 10th level or something like that, you had so many pluses to hit an opponent. It was just kind of like, okay, I need to break out my calculator so I can recalculate all my pluses for hitting this guy. And that never made much sense. It made more sense for, armor to have like an ablative damage reduction feature. Like, okay, I'm wearing plate armor. It's got like 10 damage reduction, but, for every 10 points, it loses a point of defense. And that becomes...
Go ahead.
Yeah, and then that just made more sense. It makes more logical sense to track that because you realize, at some point your armor is going to give out. And of course, like anything else in history, you make weapons that penetrate armor. That's why arrows were so popular because they had this funny way of finding all the chinks in your armor and, and crossbow bolts, especially as King Richard the Lionheart found out.
Yes. The yew bows that Henry was it Henry the Third or the Fifth? No, Henry the Fifth used at Agincourt. But I will say this. I can't remember if it's bronze plate or if it's full plate that was introduced in Unearthed Arcana does degrade over time, but I don't recall as such as it reduced damage. But first of all, I want to answer because Jay Tyler asked a good question here. Don't some things in AD&D call for a percent roll against system shock? And Jay, it's only because you're such a good customer that I answer your question, despite the fact you used a letter N instead of an ampersand between D and D. But I'm very, very picky about that. But anyway, Jay, yes, polymorph, and being raised from dead, not being reincarnated, but being raised from dead by resurrection or raised dead require a system shock roll. In the case of polymorph other, if you fail, you believe you're the thing that you've been turned into. Bob the fighter is now Bob the dromedary. And he will, and until or unless someone hits him with dispel magic and brings him back to being Bob the fighter, he will, Bob won't be able to scratch into the sand. This sucks, turn me back. So that is the answer to your question there. And Jay, if you fail the system shock roll when you're being resurrected or raised from dead, you are permanently and forever dead. Well, your character is. I don't think any players have ever gotten that upset. But anyway,
there's a question there in the audience. Well, actually, there's a comment. It says Jack Photon says Dragon Magazine had so many articles over the year on armor damage that they never worked out. I do have proof though that what I'm talking about actually works, and that is I point at RuneQuest. That's a game system that's been out almost as long as D&D.
And we've talked about RuneQuest on the show. We played a little RuneQuest on the show a few weeks back, but so here's the thing, and I'm going to compare this to alignment. People say, isn't alignment dumb? Isn't alignment silly? I don't think alignment works. And how could you say what alignment Superman really is when in issue 239 of World's Greatest, he actually did kill a guy, nobody else was in the room. It was this really evil whatever, or how can you this, that, and the other, to which I say, no, you're absolutely right. Alignment in role-playing games is ridiculous, except in Dungeons and Dragons, where it is part of the rules and it actually works. If you pull it out, a whole bunch of stuff starts to fall apart. It's intrinsic to the rules. That armor doesn't do what you're talking about. You're absolutely right, T-shirted. You're absolutely right. And it does work fantastically in RuneQuest. But that's a different game than D&D.
Right.
And in AD&D or original D&D or basic D&D, it's a little bit faster and looser. Now, to kind of address what you were saying earlier, let me ask, have you ever seen the Ridley Scott film, The Duelists?
I own it.
You own it. So the second duel in the stables, or not in the stable, actually I think it was in a cellar.
I think that's right.
I postulate that both characters, Harvey Keitel and
Keith Carradine.
Thank you, Keith. My brain kept wanting to say David Carradine, but I knew it wasn't David Carradine. That Harvey Keitel and Keith Carradine, by the time that fight is over, are both down a lot of hit points. But neither one of them has really taken a sword blow. A D&D round consisting of a full minute of combat is not stab with my sword. It could be, I bash you in the face with my sword guard. I kick you in the knee. You gouge me in the eye with your thumb as I'm pressing on you with my sword, and on and on and on and on. And the cumulative damage through even that one round can add up to the 3, 7, 5, how many ever points. It could be 100 slices with just the point of your longsword, or you, the player, may say, no, it's just a single thrust. I just ram it right through him, just 3 feet of steel up through his sternum. Okay, that's fine. But to go back to the duelist, both of those guys were down hit points. They had lost hit points in a D&D duel because they were exhausted. They were bruised. They were bloodied because they were doing just what I said. They were punching each other and elbowing each other and throwing each other across the room without actually stabbing each other yet. They couldn't get that final sword blow in. So I think that is a prime example of, you have a core of 2 to 7 hit points, and the rest is the physical stamina that you build up as an experienced person. Consider the fighting man. I'm talking about the level 0 fighting man, heavy foot, light cavalry, and so on. In AD&D, they have 1 to 7 hit points each. Average is going to be 3.5, right? Mm-hmm. When you start out as a first level fighter, you might not have too many more hit points than that. But beyond that, again, it's luck, it's favor of the gods, and so on. Now you ask about healing. What does healing do? You know, it reinvigorates you. That pulled hamstring that you got when you overextended with your two-handed sword, the pain of that goes away. You know, that severe limp that was slowing you down is done. That split lip you got when you got a sword guard right in the mouth, you know, that's stitched up. You drink a healing potion and it reinvigorates you, you know, it gets the blood pumping again, and, you know, you instantly cool down. And I know that for a lot of players, that's a little too abstract. You know, that's like, that's, you know, because if you're going to ask that, if you're going to talk about that, well, how many arrows are you firing? You know, it's like you say you fire 2 arrows and each does, let's say you get exceptionally lucky and each does 6 points of damage. Is it 6 points of damage from 1 arrow hit, or did I fire 10 arrows to do that 6 points of damage? And if so, how abstract are we going to get? I understand where you're coming from. I just think in the case of D&D, OD&D, AD&D Basic, what have you, that it's abstracted for speed, because otherwise you wind up with Rollmaster, and nobody wants Rollmaster. Am I right?
It had its good points too. I don't discount any system unless it's just absolutely just worthless. But
no, I kid Rollmaster. Rollmaster started as an alternate combat system for AD&D.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so did Arduin, effectively.
Yeah, I've got people are like, hey, Bill, you ought to do a read through on the Arduin books. These are 2.0 power readers. The text in the Arduin books is next to damn and pot. It's like Dave Hargrave said, no, smaller. You know, well, it's like the opposite of the Kylo Ren meme. Less.
Should get you the newer reprinted editions are a little bit more legible, because I have the original and the new ones.
Yeah, I'll have to, because damn, those things are legible. But you know, I think I just, for myself and for my personal ability to teach people to play AD&D, it's kind of a point of diminishing returns. You're in education, right?
Possibly, yes.
Possibly, okay. But coming from an IT background myself, I can tell you, I've heard so many arguments for let's switch the shop to Linux.
Mm-hmm.
It's this, it's that, it's the other. Let's switch the shop to Linux. And I always come back to, what are you going to save in terms of, you know, let's teach everyone brand new ways of doing things, you know? All the function keys and control key combinations in LibreOffice are completely different from Word or from Microsoft Office. All of the shortcuts that you might know in Windows and so on. Oh, and by the way, the things that you could do in Windows because you're a slight power user, you're completely locked out of those in a Linux environment unless you have root, and we're not going to give you root because that makes your machine unsafe, and so on and etc. And then the Linux user comes back and says, aha, we can reskin Linux to look exactly like Windows, and we can teach people, or we can propagate out these things that open up the systems and they make it behave exactly like Windows. And when you come to that point, I'm like, Well, what problem are you solving then? Or are you just changing things and just creating a whole new series of problems? But that's on me. I would never say to someone, no, don't experiment with AD&D. It's sacrosanct. You can't touch anything. You can't change a single word or it falls apart. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm just saying for Bill. Just so you know, we're kind of on the same. I think we're on the same wavelength. I wouldn't myself necessarily change, but I can see where you're coming from. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like there are other things, and this is a trend. I mean, I'll just go through them one by one.
Okay,
just
sure.
Things that have changed between editions that mess them up. Okay, as the disintegrate spell in the original edition, it was save or die, pretty much straight up. If you failed your save, you're gone. Bye bye.
Yeah.
Third edition, they changed it to 2d6 points per caster level, and if you made your save, you took 5d6 of disintegration damage.
That's not disintegrate.
That's disintegrate.
Just say you're hitting them with lightning bolt.
Oh, it gets better. It gets better. The first time we ran into a basilisk, I was horrified, but then I found out the rules were that stoning wears off after a certain time. Yeah. Stoning is not permanent. So, yeah, gorgons, medusas, basilisks, cockatrices, they're, he got stoned, but he got better. Yeah. And then there was the big one, the one that got me, the one that really, really, it didn't make as much of a difference to me then as it does now. Because at first I thought it was a good idea, but then now I see that it was a terrible idea. Level drains. Level drains.
Do go on about this, because I love me some level drain, but let's hear it.
Okay. Well, as you know, level drains from wights, specters, and wraiths in 3.0 and up impart what's called negative levels, which means every time you take a negative level, you have a -1 on everything that you do. Which is a nothing burger, because eventually you can take those off with restoration and lesser restoration spells. But I started with basic, with Red Book, Moldve Basic.
Mm-hmm.
Wights, who drained your levels, took everything away from you. Because they took away level. They didn't give you negative levels. As if they hit you, they literally took your level away. If you were level 3, you get hit with a wight, bam, you're level 2.
Level 2. Yes.
You get hit again, you're level 1. And of course, getting hit the last time, if you get reduced to 0 level, you die and you come back as a wight, which is a death sentence. Wights used to terrify me in basic, and they were in the modules pretty frequently.
Yeah,
because it was considered a low level monster. I'm kind of like, there's nothing low level about them. They can kill your character very, very fast. And fighters were always on the front end of having to deal with those, because they're usually meat shielding for wizards. But now I see the genius of why wights and level drains were so good, because by taking your levels away, you're taking away all that experience. But if you have a system in place where you earn experience by finding treasure, you lose a level or two, well, now you're back to adventuring, so you can get those levels back, which means finding more treasure. It's giving you a reason to continue to adventure.
Oh, yeah, unquestionably. And, I have seen a party in my Monday night game. I've seen characters. They ran into a group of wights. They got a couple characters got level drained. The treasure in the White's lair, once sold, plus the experience points for wights, was enough for the character to regain the level that they lost.
Mm-hmm.
It was literally like, there you go, you're back, you're fine. So it's not, it's, I just, I don't, I guess, help my unfrozen caveman DM brain understand this. I don't get the aversion to such things. I mean, well, it's not fun. Well, I mean, what is fun? Just spamming the I win button?
Apparently. I said this not too long ago on Twitter, but on X. I said
Twitter.
something has changed in the way players perceive the game, and it's not so much with Gen X or Boomers or anybody like that, but it seems to have started with the Millennials, and they have this pass-fail mentality when it comes to gaming. There's no gradation in the way that they play. It's pass-fail. Oh, that's not fair. I missed a saving throw and I died. Oh, that's not fair. He just took a level away from me and now I have to earn it back. Oh, that's not fair. Oh, that's not fair. That's not fair. That's not fair. I did this. Why is this happening? That's not fair. Gen X is like, hey, man, suck it up, Buttercup. You lost a level. Go grind it back. Go find some more treasure. Go kill some more monsters. Go make your level back. But somewhere along the way, and I guess it's about the same time that we started handing out participation trophies. It's like, these things are no longer death sentences. If you get stoned by the Medusa, it no longer becomes incumbent upon the party to haul your stoned corpse back to town to the cleric so that that you can get flesh to stone cast or stone to flesh cast on you to get it reversed. Now it just wears off in a few hours because oops, you made a mistake. Well, it shouldn't be all or nothing. All the save or die spells got changed up to damages. We don't even call them save or die or anything now. We just call it save or suck. Oh darn! It sucks that you missed your save. And I think it's just a it's not fair mentality. It's a pass-fail mentality. Oh darn! I can't deal with failure of any sort, so I have to have the blow softened and reduced so that my my fifis aren't hurt.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I by the way, North of the Rockies, thank you for the super, says if one pays attention to the physical and spiritual trauma suffered by Frodo after getting stabbed by the ring wraiths, then the justification for level drain becomes clear. And I think that's a fine example. I think that is a fine example. And I mean, they deal with wights in the Lord of the Rings also.
Barrow wights.
The barrow wights. They are traumatized by dealing with them. Now, you might ask the question, well, what D&D like trauma did they suffer because they seemed fine after Tom Bombadil got them? And then you have to delve into the idea of what Tom Bombadil is and how he could just wave his hand and say, run around naked on the grass, you're all fine. I just cast restoration on all of you. You're all fine. But that's absolutely right. What you're saying. And I don't even think necessarily it's so much of a generational thing because again, Peter Atkinson, Ryan Dancy, they're as old as I am, maybe even a touch older. So they grew up playing the same D&D that I did, but they took away completely different ideas from it and said, oh, that's not fun. Losing a level, that's not fun. Save or die, that's not fun. And I've talked with some feeling of pride and for the home team that Tomb of Horrors has been in every version of D&D. Did you get the Art and Arcana, the big box set?
Which? Oh no, I did not.
I hate to say give money to Wizards of the Coast, but it is worth owning a copy because it has the folio version of Tomb of Horrors in it. So
Yeah.
take that into consideration. And if you logically follow that basic D&D is a continuation of original D&D, there's Tomb of Horrors for original and basic D&D. There's Tomb of Horrors for first edition AD&D. There's Return to the Tomb of Horrors, which has Tomb of Horrors included in it for second edition. There's a Tomb of Horrors for third edition, for fourth edition, and it's wrapped around in that Tomb of Annihilation thing for fifth edition. And I'm happy that Tomb of Horrors gets that much love. But at the same time, I remember looking at the third edition, and it was there's have you read the module Tomb of Horrors?
Yeah, it's literally the very first module I ever bought.
Excellent. So the sloping corridor that dumps you into the fire, you fall in, you die.
Yeah.
And I remember cracking the 4E version or the 3E version, and it was like, you fall in and you take this much damage every round until you make a successful save. And I was like, what? No, that's not the Tomb of Horrors. That's the Tomb of Minor Inconveniences until somebody brings a ladder over.
Or how about the knockout gas corridor where the Juggernaut crushes you all to death and you can't do anything about it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just it's a sea change in the approach and the design that I don't, I was talking about this and I was getting a little pushback. If you saw it over on Twitter when I was talking about the granularity of AD&D saving throws, what do you feel about those before I start blasting down the highway about how the AD&D saving throws just their categories that seemed to upset people. Their categories. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Oh, like what, save versus rods, staves, and wands, and breath weapon,
exactly.
And polymorph, and all that. I mean, I guess
Speak your mind.
it lets you. I mean, yes, it's a lot of different categories to keep track of, but at the same time, the fact that it lets you adjust those numbers incrementally in different ways by items and everything else kind of lets you play around with stuff a little bit more versus just a straight up con save or wisdom save or dex save.
Yeah. And I was talking about it, the save system and speaking well of it. And of course it's an open conversation. I don't mind, unless somebody wants to get ugly about current, matters of the current day, social or political, which I don't discuss. I never discuss. But I don't mind that people come in and, that they disagree with me as long as they can be polite, which generally they are on RPG Twitter. But a fellow was saying, well, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you have to say versus rod, staff, or wand? Why would you say versus the spell that comes out of the rod, staff, or the wand? Why have a category for rod, staff, or wand? Because the magic is coming out of a rod, staff, or a wand.
Yeah. And then it got even a little bit weirder than that, because then it became the saving throw difficulty is based on the caster's level.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, what do I need to make this save? And me, the grognard, I'm like, well, it's a save versus spells, so just roll on that. Well, what's his level? It doesn't matter. It does. Well, sure, it matters. Just roll the dice and I'll tell you if you saved, and you run into a lot of pushback. But again, I don't think the, what is it? Constitution, fortitude, or Dex, will, fort, something like that.
Yeah, Fort Dex will.
Yeah, Fort Dex and will. Those are way too broad. I mean, I cast Ice Storm. Should I roll a fort save to see if I can cuddle up and stay warm? Should I roll a Dex save that I'm rolling out of the way of it? Or is it a willpower save because I don't believe that I know that's a magic spell?
And
Whereas in AD&D we have categories. That's a spell.
I have something right here. I'll bring up because people are asking and they can't believe this, but okay, this is on page B44 in the Moldvay BX book.
Okay,
for white.
Mine is in its box, or I would pull it out and follow.
I've got it. But it says, okay, whites have 1 attack. Their damage is energy drain, and then in the description, it says whites are greatly feared as they drain life energy when striking a victim. Each hit drains 1 level of experience or hit dice life energy. And then it says, example, a 3rd level fighter struck by a white becomes a 2nd level fighter, keeping only enough experience points to be at the midpoint of 2nd level and losing 1 hit dice of hit points. There's nothing in there about a save or nothing. I mean, if you get hit, you're losing it. It's deadly. It's no joke.
Yeah. And I mean, and here's the real deadly part of this. So it becomes important here when you're talking about level drain, not to get too laser focused on it, but you understand it as well as I do, T-shirted, that you have to keep track of how many hit points you have level to level, how many you've gotten.
Mm-hmm.
You're at 5th level, you got 10 hit points, and the white touches you and drains you down a level. Well, maybe after all that fighting, you only had 10 hit points left. Just remove that hit dice. Oh, look, you now have 0 hits. So not only did that touch level drain you, it killed your character. It can happen. If you've been whittled down enough. Now, at 5th level, you might have only gained 1 hit point. So you only lose 1 hit point. Do you see how dangerous that can be? And do you I was just going to say, do you incorporate things like that in your games?
One thing I did not know was an old way of doing this, and I didn't find out until I started playing Kevin Crawford's games. I thought this was revolutionary until somebody said, "Oh yeah, that's the way we used to do it," which made me laugh because I was like, "Oh my gosh, here I am not knowing this." But the old way of rolling up hit points and stuff like that is not the same way as it is today. I mean, because in the first place, you're rolling hit points. I mean, I don't think anybody does that anymore, where literally, if you start out as a mage or a magic user, you have a D4. You have to roll a D4 for your hit points. And if you rolled a 1, you have 1 hit point at first level.
That's right. That's right. Hide behind those fighters. You are squishy.
And the best part is every time you gained a level, you have to roll your number of dice. Like, let's say you go from 1st level mage to 2nd level mage. Okay, now you roll 2 die 4. And if the number you rolled does not exceed the amount of hit points you currently have, you keep the current level of hit points. So if you had 3 hit points as a 1st level mage, you go to 2nd level, you roll 2 die 4 to see how many hit points you have, and if the numbers come up 2, you're staying at 3 hit points for that level.
Now I have not seen that. I don't know what D&D that came out of. It's not in AD&D. Not 1st edition AD&D, and I don't think it's in I don't believe it's in Moldvay Basic. Maybe it's Holmes.
It may be Holmes, but I'd heard it came from an older form of D&D originally. But I first encountered it in Crawford's games. But I love that system. I use it for everything now. That
is kind of interesting. Now, something else. Have you at least seen or have you extensively played original D&D?
You talking about OD&D?
OD&D, white box. Yeah. Okay.
I have the rule sets for it, but I've never gotten to actually play an original white box game.
So dig this. Your character, your hit point gains, you don't get a dice every level. I believe the magic user in core OD&D. Let me grab my reader copy real quick over here. Move these carnivorous apes out of the way, apes. But I believe, come on, oh, it's really stuck in there, that in the case of the magic user, you begin with a D6 hit points, because everything was D6 back then. But let's see here. I'm looking. It's determination of abilities. But you will gain not specifically a hit dice every time you level with certain classes. You will gain a single hit point, rather. Where is that determination of hit points? Maybe it's all the way at the end after spells. OD&D is not very well organized. But yeah, so your magic user would start with 1d6 hit points. But when you go to second level, you don't gain another d6, you gain 1 hit point. So if you started with 6 hit points, bully, when you get to second level, you get 1 more hit point. Now at third level, you gain another die. So then it's 2 die plus 1. But I want to confirm those levels. Or let's see. So
they had hit point creep dealt with early on, and then through the magic of people not liking it, it got changed, and now we have hit point creep.
Kind of essentially. I mean, I'm okay with quote unquote hit point creep. I was never one of those DMs who said, "Oh, start with the max." You know, let's start your magic user. Oh, you put the 17 in your con. Okay, well your magic user starts out with 6 hit points. Congratulations. I don't do that. Let's start with the max. I just feel like it can be that is hit point bloat in a big way.
Mm-hmm. The rule I've most commonly seen after that for determining hit points and in later editions was every level you have a choice. You can either take half of your dice, like if you roll d12s like a barbarian, then you can take 6 hit points, or you can roll to see how many hit points you get. It's either or.
Okay, so here we are. Thank you, Alan Kenning. Yeah, so statistics regarding classes on page 17 of OD&D. I have my omnibus edition. This is not some TSR rarity. I got this printed on Lulu, which is why I'm curling the cover back like a monster. So for fighting men, you actually start with 1 + 1, so you're 2 to 7 to begin. You gain another hit dice at second, third, fourth, but then at 5th level, you only gain 1 hit point. And then at 6th level, you gain another die. At 7th level, you gain 1 hit point. At 8th level, you get 2 extra hit points. At 9th level, 3 extra hit points. At 10th level, 1 extra hit point. So it kind of roughly balances it out. AD&D did it with caps. As I'm sure you've seen in AD&D, like every level, starting at 10th level and every level hereafter, add 2 hit points or add 1 hit point.
The capping.
Yeah, so you do get it, and thank you for answering. I was coming back to try and answer the Jack Photon's question about hit point creep and bloat, and that as characters go up, their hit points begin to grow, and in some cases grow a great deal, so they get bloated HP, and so do the enemies. Then that is exactly correct. It is it's hockey sticking, or call it whatever you will, but things really take off.
I call it nuclear escalation, because it's kind of what it is. Oh, well, I've got 108 ICBMs, and well, I've got 200 ICBMs. Well, I've got 250 ICBMs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember when did you playtest 5e at all? I was on the 5e playtest.
I didn't playtest it. I honestly tried to avoid it because we were so deep in Pathfinder first edition at that point that it was kind of like we didn't see a point.
But you got better, and that's the important thing. No. They kind of fixed it. Because I remember we're talking about 2013. This is over a decade ago. But I remember playing a playtest game with a couple of friends. DM was online running it, and oh my God, we fought a couple of gray ooze, and I was keeping track. They had 130 hit points each. The only reason we beat those things was because our magic user wizard, sorcerer, I don't know how they're broken out nowadays. The primary spellcaster spammed, it was like some reusable cantrip that shoots a ray of fire that does like 2 to 7 points of damage or something, which I think they also took that out too. But hit point bloat was a serious problem early on in 5e. I think they kind of addressed it, but then it started creeping back in. Cause I look at 5e characters and monsters now, and I'm just like, average hit points, 90. What the hell are we talking about? An ogre. What? That's like a Titan riding a storm giant's back doesn't get 90 hit points in AD&D. My God.
Oh, we used to break the math down pretty hardcore, and so if you did it right, and this is just using the rules as written, not any additional resources, nothing else. Just if all you had was the Pathfinder basic book and nothing else, you could take a barbarian. And at first level, you start with 12 hit points. But if you pick the right, if you manage to get an 18 in your con and you put it on your con, you're 18 on your con, and then you get the right race, then you buff your con to a 20. That's plus 5 hit points at first level. So now you're up to 17. Then there's an additional feat that gives you 3 hit points to start with at first level. And then it gives you 1 additional hit point every level beyond third. So basically, right there at the beginning of the game, you've got a character sitting right at 20 hit points, which is pretty chunky.
I tell you, this is one of those things it's rare enough that I remember it happening one time, but I haven't seen it since. The Ranger in AD&D. If you max out your con in AD&D and have a Ranger, I've seen this happen one time ever, and if I hadn't seen the die rolls, I wouldn't have believed it. But it is possible to start out with 26 hit points as a first level character in AD&D. If that character is a Ranger and you have max con and you roll a 16 on your 2d8s. But Rangers at least even out after you get that initial 2 die 8, because then it drops down to a d8 for the rest of your levels, plus any con bonus. But yes, I have seen it one time, and it was just like the joke of the party. Like, okay, everybody line up behind Richard's character. He's got 24 hit points. He's tougher than all the rest of us put together. Just line up behind him and let him soak damage while we stab the thing with our spears. But that is incredibly rare, and it's rare enough that I remember the situation and the player, because on average on a D8, you're going to have 4, so even if you maxed out your con, that's 8 plus 3 on each, that would be 22. That would still be kind of steep, but still.
And Castor asks, sure, you can do that, but how often did players actually do that for HP? I don't know how prevalent it used to be, back in older editions. Seems like it didn't really start happening until 3rd edition. that people really started trying to crunch numbers and min-max. There were broken combos in earlier D&D editions for sure, especially when magic items were distributed.
Mm-hmm.
You could really get some broken combinations. But third edition, and I spoke to RPG Pundit about this, and he told me straight up. He said, yeah, the deal is from third edition on, they wanted to reward players who actually took the time to map out their character build from the beginning and build the character to optimize. So that's when we started seeing a lot of min-maxers and optimized builds. And it got worse and worse. And now in 5th edition, and most likely the next edition, that's when we started seeing meta builds, which is basically you take whatever the best of all possible classes, combinations, races, everything else that you have that's available from whatever core books you have, and then whatever supplements you have, and you build a character more or less along those lines in order to min-max all of your talents and your abilities for certain effects. Like in Pathfinder First Edition, we had characters that had, like a plus 15 or more on perception checks,
Mm-hmm.
because they had managed to, they maximized whatever stat governed perception, and then they would, of course, take the skills, the class, and whatever feats were necessary and the races that were necessary to jack that up to ridiculous levels, knowing that perception was super duper important to the game, because almost everything is a perception check, including, even if you want to go to 5th edition, passive perception rules.
Yeah. And that's what makes us so sad, because I've said twice in this live stream that the bones of 5e are good. It's a perfectly cromulent game, but they very quickly fell back into, let's just make it a char-op game again.
Mm-hmm.
It's just pure char-op. If you don't build it right out of the gate, it's broken, and it's not gonna work. And I was, damn it, 5e, we were rooting for you.
Mm-hmm.
We were rooting for you, damn it. And it just became the same arms race of.
Go ahead. It's going to be worse. It's going to be worse with the new edition coming out, because of the fact that now that they have pretty much stated up front, your race is not going to matter, because that's just going to be window dressing. What's going to be your difference is going to be your background. So, of course, everybody is going to look at what the best background is for whatever type of class they want to play. They'll take that, and then, of course, they said there's going to be 30 subclasses. And as I've said, that's just going to be a reemergence of the meta. People are going to look at every single class. They're going to find the best possible background with the best possible stats.
Yeah.
And then marry that to the best subclass. And then, they added 30 new spells to the book, which aren't really new spells. They're just basically all the spells that they cribbed from all their different sources and just stuck them all into the player's handbook now.
Yeah.
And you're going to take all the spells that are of the highest utility, because they're going to grade all the spells. All the min-maxers will go through the spell list, and they'll say, okay, these spells are coded blue. These are the best spells. You absolutely have to have these. These are the green spells. These are second tier. You can take these, but only if you haven't taken the blue spells already. Then there's the red spells. These are garbage. Don't take these. Then there's the yellow spells. These are so situational, but they might be useful. And it's just going to become a cookie cutter game like 5th edition is already. They're just making it. They're trying to tell you, oh, well, we're going to make all these changes that are going to make the game better. No, you're not. You're just making another variation of the same stuff that you've been regurgitating since 2000, when you first brought out 3rd edition and drove people to metagaming and min-maxing.
Yeah, I mean, and I know this is an outlier, and for every group like this, there's probably 100 people who just are like, yeah, just bring your character and play them and have fun. I get that. But I so many times would I see discussions online and this is going back to probably the release of Pathfinder,
Mm-hmm.
of groups being insistent, we want to see your build before you join. We want to make sure your character is built properly.
Mm-hmm.
Built properly used to mean, well, I watched you roll the 4d6, discard lowest, and arrange them to taste so you wouldn't show up at my table with 6 18s.
Yep.
And that was the breadth and depth of it. Mike Wilson asked a question. Speaking of high stats, my thoughts on 18 by double aught strength. It's great if you can get it. If you roll an 18, and then I don't math well at all, so I don't know what the odds are. I mean, I know the chances of getting an 18 are like, what is it, 1 in 236 or something like that. So multiply that times 1 in 100. So yeah, if you get an 18 and then get the double nuts on strength, why not? If the gods favored you that much, rock on.
Mike Wilson Art, I can answer you on this one. Why not an int of 18 double aught or 1652? Okay. The reason they only made the strength 18 and then it goes, from 01 to double aught is because they wanted a gradation in the limits of human and non-human strength, because again, it goes back to the races. You could have certain races that had an 18 strength, but they couldn't achieve the double aught. I believe half orcs could reach the double aught, but I don't know if dwarves could or which races could not reach double aught, because it used to have maximum strength allowable by this race.
Yeah,
it's in the AD&D first edition.
Yeah, I have the player's handbook here. Let's scroll up real quick. I can even throw this on the screen if anyone wants to see. But let me add this real quick. Don says 99% of 18 double aught strength scores are lies.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were.
Yes.
They were. But the other thing too is they wanted to establish that anything beyond 18 double aught, like a 19 or something, was truly superhuman.
Yeah.
Because the monster manual, if you look at some of the monsters, like even in deities and demigods, all their stats, they stop at 25.
Mm-hmm.
So, anything beyond an 18 is supposed to be godly. I mean, it's like even liches and stuff, which are ultra genius rated, I think they stop at like 20, 21 intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. I mean, I thought it was awesome of Jim to include those stats to see just exactly what they do. Because, hey, you can get a girdle of I think it goes up to Storm Giant, but it may go to Titan. But you can get a girdle of giant strength that'll take you up to Storm Giant strength. Then you're talking like an 19 strength or something like that. And we have deities and demigods handy for those situations where you might wind up with things stacked up so high that you end up with, with the really high stats. But so yeah, looking at the strength, 18 is maximum possible for fighters, non-fighter characters. 1850 maximum for male gnomes. I am not going to say that because I'm not getting canceled. Gary himself took the strength limitation out for human females, so we don't have to touch on that. 1875 is maximum for a male elf or female half orc. 1890 is maximum strength for a male half elf. And 1899 is maximum for a male dwarf or male half orc. And 18 double aught is maximum human strength. Only humans can hit the 18 double aught.
And again, it showed why you would want to play a human instead of a demi-human.
Exactly.
Gave you something to shoot for.
Yeah. Yeah. It absolutely gave you something to shoot for. So, But anyway, there's, it's just, and I think we can kind of maybe pull up to rest and let the engine cool. Well, I'm not sure what your schedule is like tonight, T-shirted. If there's anything else that you want to that you want to harp on here.
It just depends. You bring up the topic, I'll harp on it.
Okay. Well, I did want to bring up something here, and
Sure.
Jack says the editions are inherently different game systems. Critiquing them steals time away from AD&D discussion, and I think maybe there's a
fair.
There's a little bit of fairness to that, but there's, hey, you're in my hometown. This is my college team. I'm going to say that it's the best one, and I'm going to heap a little bit of derision on the others. But I also think that what we run into, and something that I've set my heels against, is that it is, again, the idea that we don't, we don't give the old edition, I think, enough love. But if we sit on our laurels and we don't occasionally raise our voices and say, hey, there's some stuff in the new versions that's completely gone off the rails. This is how we did it in the old ways. You wind up with a situation where, regardless of how much we do love the old editions, people don't know where it comes from. People don't know where we're coming from.
Right.
And it just seems too weird and alien to them. So it's not, and I will never, I kid about harping on people who play other editions. That is very tongue-in-cheek and jokey now in my life. Look, if you play 4E D&D and you're like, nope, this is my sweet spot. I was 13 when it came out, and this was my Stranger Things moment, and I love this edition of D&D. I, ripped my clothes and threw ashes on my head when 5E came out. Awesome. I hope you love it, and I hope you play it, and I hope you enjoy the hell out of it. I won't bash anyone for enjoying the version of D&D that they enjoy the most, unless it's Pathfinder 2E. But no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm joking.
I hate Pathfinder 2E.
And that's fine. That's fine. Ultra American TTRPG.
Hey.
And this dovetails into something that I want to talk to Stephen about tomorrow night. Stephen Radney McFarlane will be on here. I've talked to Tim M. Holt. Have you ever had a sit down with Tim?
Yeah, we had Tim M. Holt on.
Yeah, Tim's a great guy. And that is this. We are this close, I think, to Wizards of the Coast. Yes, Wizards of the Coast. Write this down. Mark this as a weird banner day, because I'm about to say something potentially positive about Wizards of the Coast, and it is this. We are this close that if Wizards of the Coast literally nudged things ever so slightly, they could make Dungeons and Dragons perfect, adamantium clad, and unbeatable as a game system. Do you know what that is, T-shirted? Do you want to wager a guess on what that is?
I'm guessing getting people back into the company who actually love it.
Ooh, that's, I think that's a good one. I think that would actually tie into the answer. And I know I was a little unfair. I was a little Bilbo Baggins, what have I got in my pocket moments. But move original D&D basics, Holmes through that black almost board game box that they released, and the rules cyclopedia, first edition AD&D and second edition AD&D, into the Creative Commons, let people develop for it, and publish modules that say for use with advanced Dungeons and Dragons, for use with basic Dungeons and Dragons, for use with the Rules Cyclopedia Dungeons and Dragons, for use with second edition advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Say, just like PayPal does. When somebody gives me money through PayPal, PayPal's like, here's most of your money. We'd like a little bit of that. YouTube goes, here's some of your money. We're going to take a big chunk of that. You know that as well as I do. But I don't begrudge them because it's an income stream. If Wizards of the Coast opened up old D&D for development and they could do it, they're that close to doing it. I don't mean they're close to doing it like it's going to happen any day now. I'm just saying from a legal standpoint, it would just take a slight nudge. Then I want to be very careful how I phrase this because I don't want people to think that I'm denigrating them. But the clone systems out there, for a lot of people, they wouldn't need to, they wouldn't need them anymore.
Yep.
Now I know there's people who love, oh, thank you very much, Don. I'm going to answer this question for you here in just a second. They would just say, oh, I can buy an AD&D module. You wouldn't have to dance around with crap like, this is for the first ever release of the advanced version of the most popular role-playing game ever. Wink, wink. You know, this is set in the kingdom of dull silver predatory bird. Or this is set in flying, fire-breathing lizard spear land, you know? You could use that stuff. And kitchen sink press guys like me, suddenly our audience would go from, 90 people downloading something in a month to 900 people buying something in a month. And maybe that's a little over optimistic, but with Wizards sucking in a little bit extra from that, it would make Dungeons and Dragons unassailably perfect because everybody would get what they want. Everybody would get what they want. You'd make the grogs happy.
Yep.
And you could develop D&D out to the end of time. Because I'll tell you, in 1980, and if you don't believe me, viewers, T-shirted, anybody, in 1980, you can look this up in a PDF copy of the TSR, Your Gateway to Adventure catalog that came in your Star Frontiers, your basic D&D box sets, or was at the counter at your hobby shop. They sold Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, Basic Dungeons and Dragons and Expert D&D, and Original D&D, and all the supplements. You could still order it from the Dungeon Hobby Shop. It didn't hurt TSR.
Nope.
It helped them. So that's what they could do. But I want to answer Don's question here. What options do I like for ability checks in AD&D? How about you, T-shirted? I know what I like, but you go ahead.
What options do I like for ability checks? I love Castles in Crusade, Don. I really do. So I hate to say anything bad about their ability checks, but I don't like the siege system. Sorry. I love their classes and everything else about them, but I'm just not that crazy about the siege system for ability checks. I love the way that Worlds Without Number, Stars Without Number, and Cities Without Number handles it. You've got a skill check. You roll 2d6, and it's, you make it or you don't. It's like all, or same thing with the ability checks too. Roll a d20, add your modifiers, and go.
Now, speaking for myself, ability checks are. See, here's the thing: if you go through all the classic modules, like the big 28, starting with the G series all the way to the EX series and so on, and sprinkled through there are so many different approaches to it that different module authors said. And it was usually something physical, right? Like, the room will fill with gas. The party can survive if they hold their breath. If they can roll into their constitution on 3 6-sided dice, they can hold their breath long enough. Or, if a character falls into the water and they try to swim, they can swim for a number of turns equal to a D20 score minus their constitution, or, you know, something like that. They would always, it was different authors trying different things. But if if somebody's just like, how would I know if I know that? You know, and they're not thinking in the meta, I might say, roll a D20 and tell me if you got under your intelligence. Roll a D20 and tell me if you got under your whatever. Fortunately, Constitution has the system shock roll, which you can utilize if that comes up. There are different methodologies. Some of them are hard coded in the rules. Some of them you got to go digging through modules. Typically speaking, if it's not hard coded in the rules for me, Don, I'll say D20 under your stat, because there's always that margin of failure, right? Yep. A 19 or a 20 is going to blow it. A 1 and you're golden. One of the few times you want to see a 1 on a D20. Am I right?
There you go.
So that's just how I would.
And saying something, since we're talking about AD&D and everybody wants to stay on topic with that, I will say one really good thing about AD&D, something that I really appreciated and I loved, and I still do. Mm-hmm. And, Macho Mandolf and I had this conversation a few nights ago. We were, he was saying, he said, the one thing I don't like about newer editions is that, you have stuff with qualities. So like if you have an axe, it could have a sharpness quality. And I said, yeah, exactly. Because now it means, it's not as special when you run into a Vorpal sword. Whereas if you ran into a Vorpal sword in first edition, whoa. Yeah. That was a cool weapon.
Yeah. I feel like that started in 3E with Masterwork.
Yeah, the qualities.
Masterwork dagger. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, whatever. Jimmy Invictus, have a lovely evening, sir. And feel better soon. Get up off your butt and get out of that hospital, my friend. But we have been going for a good couple of hours now, and unfortunately my voice is kind of starting to get pretty soon. T-shirted, I'm going to be like, hey, T-shirted, do you want to go to 7-Eleven?
And get a big gulp.
Yeah. We'll play some Pac-Man and get a Hot Rod magazine too.
How many quarters I wasted on Defender.
Oh my gosh. It was Commando and
that was
what was the other one? Track and Field.
Oh yeah, Track and Field. But you know what? The one I blew the most amount of money on?
What's that?
Dragon's Lair.
That thing was just a money suck. There was no beating Dragon's Lair.
It was so hard.
You might as well have just walked into your den and told your dad, "Hey, Dad, would you write a check to RDI?" Don Bluth Studios and RDI for $15. What the hell would I do that for? That's like a quarter of my pay. Because it's that, or I go play Dragon's Lair. 50 cents a whack. It's just more efficient if you just mail your money straight to the people who made RDI, who actually built the hardware, and Don Bluth Studios who wrote the video game. But
Jungle King. Oh, I spent so much money on Jungle King. I love Jungle King.
I loved that scratchy 8.
Yes.
Maybe it wasn't even 4-bit sample of Tarzan's yell.
The Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan yell. Yep.
Yes, that was so awesome. And that thump when you'd fall off the vines. And the whole screen just boom. Mm-hmm. But my real poison, and it was not a hugely popular game, so I only knew of a few arcades that ever had it. I loved. You're very close because it used the same hardware.
Wizard of War.
Wizard of War. You got it in 2.
I knew it was
Wizard
one of the 2.
Wizard of War. I loved Wizard of War because you could do PvP, you could do co-op, single player, and when you got that wizard and that screen went berserk with those white noise runs up and down. It would flash black and white, and you'd see Wizard of War scroll out across the screen. That was a dopamine hit.
Big time.
For me that no other video game brought. No other video game. Joust was another good one when you hit the you'd hit the pterodactyl.
The pterodactyl, yeah.
Yeah, because when that son of a bitch would show up, it would just be like,
uh-oh.
Yeah, I might as well just walk away from the machine because I'm not gonna, I got like a 1 in 200 chance of bopping this guy. But I could Defender had too many controls for me.
Yeah, it did. The reverse button,
and I know
the
it
thrust.
was like one under each. It basically you just put your fingers down, but I never had that level of coordination. I could do 1 or 2 button shooters. Star Wars Arcade was one I could just drop 50 cents in, and this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the afternoon. Mm-hmm. Just blowing up Death Stars left, right, and center.
Oh yeah, Graph Paper Architect. Yeah, Golden Axe. I loved the hell out of Golden Axe. I played that so much, but that was later.
Golden Axe is one of the later. Any video game, I didn't care what the format was, side-scrolling, beat 'em up. I guess you'd call like I love Black Tiger. Black Tiger had such cool D&D vibes to it.
It did.
You'd call that a Metroidvania now, right?
Pretty much.
But any game that had depth, any game that felt like you were going and doing instead of just, patterny kind of, and that's where, like, even though I was never any good at it, I liked Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. because the screens changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was another early one. So.
Yeah, but things that just felt like they had depth, like Dungeons and Dragons, Tower of Doom, Golden Axe,
King of Dragons, Knights of the
Round, Black Tiger, stuff where you felt like you were going deeper into a world.
Magic Sword,
Major Havoc, which was so weird. Major Havoc was so weird.
Oh, and Rostan was. Oh man, do you know we the first time I encountered Rostan. Of course, I was on a Conan kick. I always was. And we went to, like, I think it was Wet and Wild. And, I don't remember how old I was, like 11 or 12. Mm-hmm. And, of course, they had an arcade at Wet and Wild. Well, I saw the Rostan machine. And I know that we spent the, whole day up there, but I'm pretty sure I spent most of that day playing Rostan.
I can absolutely believe it. Rostan was just, it was such a great game. It was brutally hard. Like I have the MAME ROM somewhere. I haven't played it in forever, but I mean, even if you said, okay, 5 lives, minimum difficulty, I'm sorry. I'm on those 5 lives. I'm not getting past, the first castle.
I loved the game so much. I bought the soundtrack.
That's a good one.
And who could forget Rygar?
Rygar was another good one. I love the Rygar sound effects, that scream, rah, rah, rah. I loved the Rygar sound effects. It was good stuff.
And the first time I played Altered Beast. Oh man.
Altered Beast. Yeah. Gauntlet,
yes. Classic.
Gauntlet.
Elf has shot the food.
Warrior is about to die. Wizard needs food badly. You'd have like 2,000 hit points. You'd start off like 2,000 hit points as a warrior and just wade into an area where a generator was to knock it down. And you get that DM's voice. I've not seen such bravery. It was, like I said, it's about that dopamine release.
I don't remember if it was Gauntlet or Gauntlet 2 where you could actually start sticking in additional quarters to get more life on your character.
Yeah, that was it. Hey, it too followed Treasure for XP, I guess.
Yes, it did.
But good times. Well, I think we're probably I think we've answered all the critical problems with Dungeons and Dragons for the evening because we've moved on into video games. Anything you want to close with, T-shirted? You've got the talking stick if you want to wrap us up.
Well, just, come by, hang out on my channel. You know, when you're not watching Dungeon Delver, of course, because one thing I do try to do is we do explore a lot of indie RPGs, either on Tuesday mornings with Dungeons and Discussions for as long as it runs. It's a seasonal thing because I can't do it all the time. It's just when I have time off. But we usually try to explore evergreen content on that. And we do have guests on our Week in Geek show whenever we can. In fact, this week we've got the Chubby Funster going to be talking with us about his games, and he's got quite a lot. We've had Alexander McCrease, we've had Mark Reinhagen, we've had we've had a lot of really good game designers and things, big and small. But I never have gotten my my unicorn on the show.
Oh,
my one and only. Mike Pondsmith.
I'm not gonna lie. I reached out to Artel too. I would love to have Pondsmith on the Delve, man.
You know what? I always tell the story because I was in Origins in Dallas or Fort Worth. I think it was back in, I want to say it was 93. I still have the program somewhere. I was at Origins and I was waiting in line to get registered for an event or something. Mike Pondsmith and Lisa Pondsmith are walking up, and I know who they are. I have all their games, and I'm literally like, I could have just reached out and touched him, and it was in me to say something to him, and, scared, overwhelmed 21, 22-year-old just watches him walk by, and I missed my moment in history, and I have kicked myself in the ass ever since, every day.
Man. Well, I hope you get him on the show, dude. I hope you get him on your show. I really do. I firmly believe there's an alternate universe where Mike Pondsmith is like a million selling vocalist. Because that dude can melt butter with his voice.
He can.
And of course, we are lucky enough to have the one that makes great RPGs. Well, all right, man. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to grab yourself a t-shirt and a koozie and bottled water over in the green room, I appreciate it. But before I go, I do want to thank Doc Flamingo and Michael Dale for your continued membership. Doc Flamingo for the $10 super. Off Grid Grognard, who threw 4 $1 supers. Thank you very much, Off Grid. North of the Rockies and Don McVitie, thank you both again for your supers. I really appreciate it, guys. If you haven't already, please do click the subscribe button, click the bell icon for notification. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you liked about it. I'll do more of it, like having amazing guests like T-Shirted on. If you don't like the video, give it a thumbs down, leave a comment below, and I'll do less of it. I'm eager to please. But speaking of guests, I'll be back tomorrow night with Stephen Radney McFarlane, and we'll talk about more important RPG stuff and hear tales from the trenches over there at those coastal wizards. But until then, everybody, regardless of what you do and how you do it, please keep your eyes peeled for the dreaded owl bears. Peace. Good night. I love you all.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around. Some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle way off course? Naked as a toad all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing dicks, just take me to